There's not always a twist in the end, or middle, or even the beginning, to paraphrase that other franchise, edging towards a crossover. However, we should not be surprised by the new set of coordinates when the plot does take a turn. Foreshadowing is not foretelling. A good twist requires manual helm control. Spoiler alert, things are never quite so straightforward. Star Trek has provided plenty of unforeseen flippings of the script over the years, so much so that we've already done several lists on the subject. In amongst the outright unexpected of a Romulan reveal or a changeling copy, the reverse of the surprise reversal has been true too. We saw some Trek twists coming about 10 billion kilometers away. None of that necessarily means a bad episode. A good dose of dramatic irony can provide some of the best. As a rule, fans also make for good sleuths, piecing together clues at a formidable pace. As another rule, there's got to be some good sleuthing to do in the first place, and for these cases, we definitely didn't need Dixon Hill. I'm Sean Ferrick for TrekCulture, and here's 10 plot twists everyone saw coming. Number 10. Barzan back and forth. Options? There are none. That question from Captain Janeway and that reply from Ensign Kim at the end of False Prophets sums up the outcome of all of Voyager's would-be shortcuts home until the very last. The plot twist was, by necessity, always back to square one, or back to whatever square of the Delta Quadrant they had reached by that episode. Barzan and those bloody Ferengi were but one in a line of examples of what Lieutenant Paris would later call the tendency to blow up in our faces. If Voyager had flown back through that wormhole in Season 3, the twist would have turned the series on its head. The highly frustrating for the crew was the already obvious for the viewer. The carrot had to be the stick. We all knew no amount of high-intensity impulse would see them catch up with that aperture. The would they was the how would they not. Barzan, previously of the price, wasn't even the first wormhole to have teased a quick hop across the galaxy for the Intrepid class. At the end of the excellent Eye of the Needle, the twist was temporal mechanics, not a debrief with Starfleet. Later, the telepathic picture plant would tempt Voyager with a fake wormhole to Earth's doorstep this time. Number 9. Preempting preemptive. Star Trek The Next Generation went out in the finest of forms, and that includes its penultimate episode, Preemptive Strike. It is by no means a critique to say that we'd all seen the twist coming before the barrel of that phaser. In fact, sorry Captain, it only ever made perfect sense. Until quite late in the day, according to the Star Trek The Next Generation companion, the episode was called The Good Fight. Laren had to join it. Sent undercover into the Maquis, Ro could never have remained indifferent to their struggle, could never have remained insensitive to the plight those in the demilitarized zone faced. Ro grew up under the boot of Cardassian domination during the occupation. Choosing her for the mission in part because she was Bajoran was downright cruel in the first place. Captain Picard might have taken less than several decades to understand and accept the consequences of his and Admiral Nechev's decision to understand Ro. By the point of Macias's death on the colony during a Cardassian assault, the turncoat twist was all but inevitable. Its predictability was, in this case, the great strength of the episode. It could have been the apotheosis of the character were it not for an even greater surprise years later. In her final moment of preemptive strike, Ro beamed away from one shuttle. Now, the ultimate twist would be that she made it off another. Number 8. Virtually Vulcan. There's something oddly familiar about Doctor's Orders, the third season episode of Star Trek Enterprise. Crossing a dangerous region of space with a crew in a comatose state. Now, where have we heard that one before? This time, there was no Tom Paris to put back to bed, nor EMH on call. The Doctor was Phlox, and his familiar was T'Pol. The twist wasn't, they did that already in 1 from Star Trek Voyager, but it was about as self-evident. T'Pol, or so it would seem, said as much to Phlox. You once told Ensign Sato that it's considered healthy for denobulans to hallucinate. He had indeed said that in an earlier episode in the season, Exile. Here, in Doctor's Orders, Phlox was actually re-informing himself. He still hadn't caught on, but we had. Unlike 7 of 9, and unless you count Porthos, Phlox was truly on his own for the journey in reconfigured space. T'Pol had been a hallucination throughout, but a decidedly friendlier one than that Xindi insectoid. Other clues included the science officer's sudden and inconvenient lack of science. The ending in T'Pol's quarters wasn't a surprise. It was arguably still a well-executed attempt. Does that mean, however, that Phlox never checked up on the real T'Pol that whole time? Number 7. Show Trial. A blistering courtroom drama with an impressive guest star cast ad aspera per aspera is undeniably one of the best examples of Star Trek in recent years. The piece, like the defense, was practically faultless in its execution. Sadly, the same can't be said about the official promotion for Star Trek Strange New Worlds' second season. The spoilers were such that, like a Cardassian show trial, we knew the verdict for Una in advance. Season 1 ended on quite the cliffhanger of quite the episode, though events had been foreshadowed in the alternate timeline of A Quality of Mercy. the conclusion was still a shock. Commander Chin Riley was arrested for violations of the Anti-Genetic Modification Directive. At that point, we didn't know if we'd ever see Una again outside of prison, let alone back in Starfleet. It was more than a little baffling, therefore, that a teaser and trailer for Season 2 would show Una in uniform, on an away mission, and Una on the bridge. Unlike in said alternate timeline, the illicit Illyrian clearly hadn't been sentenced to a Federation penal colony on Salius 6. In fact, she'd evidently got to keep her commission. In the end, the how of it all was a masterclass. The if could have done with a few lessons in suspense from the brilliant Nira Khatul. Number 6. Fool's Mate. The opening gambit of Gambit Part 1 was the demise of Captain Picard. Countermove, surprise reversal, and soon a smack in the face for Commander Riker. Jean-Luc's not dead. Because of course he's not. They weren't going to kill off the star of the show, except all those times they technically did. As a cold open death fake out, it was still rather effective. None of us, nor the characters, had heard of the energy weapon transporter combo at that point. Crusher's scans and Troy's "he's telling the truth" about Picard's vaporization was all they, had to go on, aside from the knowledge that this 7th season had barely just begun. Despite years of practice, Riker sure needed to work on his poker face, shocked as he was to see Picard back from being a cloud without a microcrystalline scratch on him. The twist for the viewer aboard the mercenary ship was more in the chair as alias Galen, an odd but apt homage to a former professor, swiveled about. What on unearthed Vulcan artifacts was he doing in that outfit? Number 5. Red all over. A penchant for all things of the colour comes with the territory for Terry Matalas, but just what was behind the big red door? Theories flourished during the run of Star Trek Picard's 3rd season as to the meaning of the visual metaphor plaguing Jack Crusher. Was it the Pa-Wraith? Was it Rick Astley, as one Reddit user suggested? Like father, like son, the Borg hypothesis was never far away. In another twist on the twist subgenre, it was an accidental subtitle that saw the red door opened in advance. As Jack stares into the mirror at the end of No Win Scenario, only the 4th episode, or part, certain closed captions initially gave Borg Queen for the voices he was hearing in his head. This was rapidly changed to whispered voice, but you can't Kobayashi Maru the internet. Anyone with so much as a Raspberry Pi and the willpower could find out the big reveal if they wanted to. Moreover, inasmuch as the Borg had been done to near galactic extinction, could the answer have been anything else? Would another twist have been quite so pertinent? The red door was that one to engineering behind which the Borg Queen first lay in First Contact, for which Alice Krieg was once more the whispered voice here. Number 4. Tribble your troubles away. Star Trek: The Search for Kirk doesn't quite have the same ring to it. Probably best, therefore, that they didn't spend the next film doing it when the irradiated roles were reversed. If Star Trek Into Darkness was the remake of The Wrath of Khan, the MacGuffin in both was still McCoy. In the former, it was more remember that Tribble than remember, and then time to collect more superblood. The twist in Into Darkness was about as subtle as either can. Out of the warp core into the cryotube, as the saying goes, no sooner was Kelvin Kirk dead than he was going to be put on ice. We haven't needed to freeze anyone since we developed warp capability, Dr. McCoy said regarding the augment ice lolly in the torpedo tube. Oh, don't be so sure, my dear bones, don't be so sure. No ship-to-ship soliloquies either. In this one, they had Khan on board. That way, McCoy could inject those magical platelets into the deceased tissue of a necrotic host. Oh, that sounds important. Cut to Tribble chittering softly, as the subtitles eloquently put it, and we've come full circle. There are worse things you can do with those furry thwarters of the Klingon Empire. With all that superblood, the real twist might have been the rise of the Super Turtle to rule them all. Number 3. Next of Nanakin. This isn't a bandwagon, it's an anti-grav platform. Caught red-tentacled, Fuzz did jump onto one of those. Star Trek Section 31 is what it is, and it certainly wasn't much of a whodunit. Was the murderer A, an upstanding Starfleet officer, or B, the microscopic maniac who can fly inside mech tech? You have exactly no seconds. Mine's the jam scodes, outside of obvious, please. Nevertheless, with more than just a hole in the head, the following is dialogue. Zeph, this is my suit. We were your friends. We were your friends. You can't kill me. And then Quasi, Zeph killed himself? Why would he do that? Some consolation, the whole thing will probably provide plenty of laughs to those strictly no-office parties in the 2370s. Not at all a twist, but at least an amusing training program for future recruits. Plus his wife probably donated the transcripts. On the subject of everything in, around, and up the God's End, there was also San's semi-miraculous return. Telegraphed to within a nanokin meter of its life, the entire multiverse, minus the ex-Emperor, saw that one coming too. Divine intervention won't save you now. Number 2. Line of Meridian. "Something's wrong," says Doral as planet Meridian begins to shift. "Oh really, quelle surprise. Also, and no offense, thank the transdimensional heavens things did go sideways. If not, we'd have lost Jadzia Dax for 60 years, all because of the shortest Is It Even Summer's romance." Meridian, the episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine's third season, tends to rank highly on the lowest lists. Its highly predictable ending was only part of the problem, a symptom of the rest. Jadzia was a brilliant scientist in her own right, and a skilled Starfleet officer too. With Dax, she had the added experience of lifetime. That she would abandon her career, her colleagues, and her friends for some bloke she's just met stretched credibility down to the quantum level. Nevertheless, Jadzia chose to stay on Meridian. As soon as the decision was made, we knew it had to be swiftly revoked. This was still, by and large, episodic television after all. The narrative arc was self-contained. The only surprise was that a beloved character would be done such a disservice that a lack of agency should save her from herself. The benefit of more episodic television is that certain plot twists don't need to hang around. That is, of course, until they do. Number 1. The risk of risky business. No, this isn't about Quark's moon, or lack thereof, though business as usual is still the theme. A good while before Cousin Gala, Captain Kirk was extolling the virtues of an entirely different kind of venture. "Risk is our business" is one of Star Trek's most famous monologues, quite rightly so. The riskier the speech, however, the more foregone the road. Return to Tomorrow's conclusion was there in the briefing room. Of course, we couldn't have predicted exactly how things would turn out with the Aretans, but if you are talking enormous danger potential by Act 2, Acts 3 and 4 could hardly have proceeded well. Hosting the consciousness of an ancient being while your own sits in a spherical storage? What could possibly go right? "Have no fear, Sargon is here," William Shatner said in one of the bloopers for Return to Tomorrow. Sargon, in the body of Kirk, did at least try to play ball out of his ball, but there's always one, or two, to ruin it. Henoch, in the "I'm keeping the" body of Spock, combine that with thalassophobia, and it was oblivion's depths for them all, after hell for the Enterprise crew. Don't say we didn't tell you so. Thank you so much everyone for listening and watching along. You're awesome, you're wonderful. Thank you so much Jack, who wrote the article this is based on. You can catch that over on whatculture.com. Please make sure you're following us on the various socials. We're at TrekCulture. I've been at Sean Ferrick. Until I see you again, make sure that you live long and prosper, and if you can see the twist coming, just enjoy it all the same. It can still be a good laugh. Thanks very much.